So with us having this break in the season, I thought that now would be a good time to have a little bit of a reflection back on it, more specifically at the managers who have been in the league this year. And in today's video, we're going to be ranking them from worst going up to best. So far this season in the Championship, we've had 29 managers. In today's list, it's just going to be people who have been there full time, so no caretaker managers or anything like that. But I'd be interested to get your guys' opinions on what you make of my rankings here. So before we do get into my list, I want to give a shout out to our sponsors over at OneFootball. As always, you can check out their link in the top line of the description down below. Really handy football app to have to keep up to date with everything going on at the moment. Obviously, it's an absolute nightmare having football cancelled for the time being, but any updates that do come on, you know, there's been a lot of discussions around the moment about how we're actually going to complete this season, what's going to happen, is it going to become null and void and everything like that. So to keep up to date with all the latest news around that, OneFootball is a really handy app to have for that. But without any further ado, let's hop in to this list. So we're going from worst and working our way up to best. So starting out at the bottom of the pile, we are going to have former Huddersfield manager Jan Siewert. This guy, it was a bit of a mess at Huddersfield at the start of the season. I think a lot of people were surprised that Jan Siewert was given time over the summer to try and develop this Huddersfield squad, and then 3 games into this season, after they failed to win any of their matches, just picking up the 1 point, they then decided to go on and sack him. He did not have a good record at Huddersfield at all. He had a win percentage of 5.3% in the 19 games he was in charge at Huddersfield for. They only picked up 1 win. I think a lot of people were expecting Huddersfield to have a bit of a tough start to the season. You know, it was always going to be a bit of a hangover from last season in the Premier League, but no one quite expected them at the start of the year, and me especially, to be quite as bad as they were. And Jan Siewert, I think he's got to come in at the bottom of the pile. In the 28th, we are then going to have Nathan Jones. Couldn't find the formula for Stoke in the second half of last season, but I think a lot of people thought that given the pre-season that they'd had, he had the chance to get some of his own players in as well. We thought that there may be a bit of a turnaround in Stoke this season. That just didn't happen. And I seem like a really nice guy. I think a lot of people wanted him to get it right at Stoke, but it just wasn't going to happen. They were persisting with that diamond in midfield. While he was there, he had a win percentage of just 15.8%, and ultimately, under Jones, I think Stoke were just going in one direction, and that was down to League One. In the 27th, we're going to have Jose Gomez, another manager who I had quite high expectations for coming into this season. After the way that Reading had finished last season, there seemed to be quite a good feel-good factor around the club. You know, a lot of the fans had bought in to the project under Gomez, but the way the season started for Reading, things just weren't going to plan. In the end, he was sacked after 11 matches, after Reading had just won 2 of their opening 11. They were left in the relegation zone in 22nd when he was eventually sacked, and I mean, that team that Reading have got there was just way too good to be in the position they were. So maybe he would have been able to turn it around, but ultimately things didn't go to plan for him this season. In 26, we are then going to have Daniel Stendhal. Now, when he was sacked at Barnsley, he left them in a bit of a difficult position. They were sat 23rd in the Championship. After 11 games, they'd only picked up 6 points, only winning 1 of their opening 11 matches, and that was on the opening day. They went on a 10-game winless run. His last game in charge at Barnsley was against North End at Deepdale, and I mean, I've seen some pretty bad sides come to Preston over the last few years. You know, Ipswich last season were awful. Rotherham a couple of seasons before that were pretty bad as well, but that Barnsley side, who we beat by 5-1, genuinely may just have been the worst. Like, defensively, they were an absolute shambles. Stendhal had a pretty impossible job of having to blend in like 12 new players all under the age of 23 into that team. Things did go wrong, and it can't always be Stendhal who was accountable. You know, at the time, a lot of Barnsley fans were disappointed with the decision, but ultimately, I can't justify putting him much higher on this list. 25th, we are then going to have Grant McCann, primarily because of the run that Hull City currently find themselves on. I mean, earlier on this season, they picked up some absolutely brilliant results, and they were actually playing some really good football. You know, they got quite a good young side in there, but I think what their form has showed since January was their reliance on the likes of Grosicki and Bowen. You know, since those two have left, they've had very little going forward, and injuries haven't helped them, but I do feel as if certain situations and in-game management could have been a lot better with Hull on this recent run they've gone. They're now tantalisingly close to the relegation zone, and should they go down, given the position they were in a couple of months ago, I think that would be a bit of a disaster. In 24th, we're then going to have Graham Jones, the Luton Town manager. Once again, he's a difficult one to judge because I think a lot of people sort of expected Luton to be in and around this situation, and with 9 games to go, they do still have the possibility of survival, and if they were to do that, I'd bump him up on this list quite a bit actually, because they will have then met their expectations. But with them being sat 23rd in the league at the moment, they've slightly picked their form up recently. In 23rd, we are then going to have Neil Warnock. Now, this list here is only based off this season and this season in isolation. You know, Neil Warnock over the years has been one of the most, if not the most consistent championship managers. You know, he's absolutely brilliant at getting teams promoted, but judging off this season, things didn't quite go to plan with him at Cardiff, and it just, his time there sort of just fizzled out a little bit, really. Warnock ended up leaving Cardiff 16 games into this season with them sat 14th in the table, so it wasn't a complete disaster of a season for Cardiff, but they weren't where they wanted to be. Up next, we're then going to have Gary Monk, the current Sheffield Wednesday manager. Now, Gary Monk is another tough one as to where to place on this list, really. I mean, he came in after the season had started. He came in early September after they were trying to sort out their managerial situation after Steve Bruce had left them in the summer to go to Newcastle. When Monk was first introduced to Wednesday, given that it wasn't his squad, they were picking up really consistent results. He only lost 3 of his first 17 matches in charge of Wednesday, but then after that consistent start that they went on, they'd now only won 2 of their last 14 matches. So Gary Monk, I'd be interested to know from Wednesday fans, how much of the blame do you put on Gary Monk for this recent run that you guys have gone, you know? In the 21st, we are then going to have Paul Cook. Now, Paul Cook, the Wigan manager, was going to be a lot lower on this list if I had made this video about a month ago or something like that, because after the amount of money that Wigan had spent in the transfer window, you know, on transfer deadline day, they actually did quite a bit of business, but it really did take Wigan quite a bit of time before they finally clicked into gear this season. They have eventually done that and no longer sat in the relegation zone, and after putting together a really consistent run of results where they have been scoring more goals, I think Paul Cook does deserve a bit of credit for that. In the 20th, we're going to have Jonathan Woodgate. Woodgate's another tricky manager as to where to judge, really. Obviously, Middlesbrough were just coming off the back of a couple of years of Pulis ball. Woodgate had the objective of fitting in a lot of youth players into their ranks. You know, he's been doing that quite efficiently so far this season. I think that is one of the things that Woodgate has done well. But there is no getting away from the fact that they are in this relegation battle at this point in time. Given what he's had to work with, I don't think it's been a complete disaster like some of the managers we mentioned previously. In the 19th, we are then going to have Gerhard Struber, the second Barnsley manager to be appearing on this list here today. Struber came into a really difficult situation at Barnsley, with them being in the relegation zone, looked quite cut adrift and with not much hope of survival. Since he has come in, there has most certainly been the upturn in form, and actually since his arrival, Barnsley is at 15th in the form table, which does go to show the damage was done before Struber came into the job. Next on the list, we're going to have Neil Harris. Now, Neil Harris is a tough one to judge on this one, primarily because he's been in 2 jobs this season. Obviously, at the start of the season, he was the Millwall manager. Things didn't really go to plan for them this season. They had quite a decent summer transfer window, I thought, where they looked to try and freshen up the squad a little bit, but the tactics were the same with Millwall this season. Eventually, he left them 10 games into the season, with them being sat 18th in the table, so they were underachieving, and we do have to hold Harris quite accountable for that. But then, since coming into the job at Cardiff, on the whole, I think he's done not an exceptional job, but I think he's been solid there. So overall, he falls sort of in the middle of this list, where he's been solid this season, but not like exceptional. Next up, it's then going to be Lee Bowyer. Charlton are currently sat in the relegation zone, but he's had such a difficult job to work with this season in terms of the injuries that Charlton have had this season has been unprecedented in the Championship. Like the young players he's had to bring into the side, as well as that he's had players leaving in January, like the recall of Callum Gallagher, which didn't help them. The mess that Charlton appears to be off the pitch at the moment, with the arguments going on between their chairman and the majority shareholder. Everything around Charlton is an absolute mess, and I feel like Bowyer sort of deserves a pass for this season because of what he's had to work with. Like, he's doing the best with the resources available. When Charlton did have a fully fit squad, everyone was available at the start of the season, they were absolutely flying in the league. They won 5 of their first 9 matches. But at this point in time, obviously when they're making this video, they are in that relegation zone. With the form they're currently on, it's looking like it would probably be Charlton or Hull going down. In 16th, we're then going to have Mark Bowen. Now, there was a lot of negativity surrounding Mark Bowen when he was first appointed as the running manager. Obviously, he used to be their sporting director, so was behind the sacking of Jose Gomez, and then it appeared at the time that he sort of made himself the new manager, which was a bit bizarre really, but given the job he's done, considering he took over Reading while they were in the relegation zone, has been able to comfortably guide them into mid-table, I don't think there can be really that many complaints about the job that he's done there. I think the decision that Reading are going to be faced with over the summer is, do they stick with Bowen or do they go venturing off looking for someone else? I'd be really interested to know from Reading fans, where do you stand on Mark Bowen, and do you think he's the right man long term? Because short term, I think he's done an alright job this season. In the 15th and the midpoint on today's list, we are going to have Philip Cocu, the Derby manager. Now, Cocu had a difficult start at Derby, there's no denying that. You know, at the start of the season, there were a few calls going around that is he the right man to take Derby forward. The football they were playing at the time is taking them quite a long time to get used to his philosophy, but since the turn of the year and the introduction of Wayne Rooney, some of the new youngsters that they blooded into the squad as well, there's been a real uplift in Derby, and given the players who they had last season, who they no longer have this season, I think it was always expected that they were going to have this drop off. But interestingly enough, this time last season, Derby only had 5 more points than they do at this point of the season, and that's with the likes of Tamori, Mason Mount and Harry Wilson. You know, think of how much quality they have lost in those 3 players, and they only had 5 more points this time last season under Frank Lampard, and we all hold him in very high regard for the job he did at Derby. 14th, we're going to have Pep Clotter. Now, Clotter was given a bit of a difficult job at Birmingham. Obviously, there was a lot of doom and gloom going on around the club after the whole Gary Monk fiasco at the start of the season. They lost the goals of Che Adams as well. That was always going to have an influence on where they finished this season, and not really being able to replace that quality until January when they signed Scott Hogan on loan for the rest of the season. They're sat mid-table in the Championship, and to be honest, I think that's where sort of a lot of people saw them finishing. So from the outside looking in, it is like they are managing expectations at the moment, and with Clotter, considering this is his first proper season at this level managing, he's not done an awful job. In 13th, I've got Scott Parker. Now, it feels a bit weird putting Parker here, considering that Fulham are sat 3rd in the Championship at the moment and have every possibility of being promoted come the end of the season. The only thing is that when you look at that Fulham squad, it is probably the best in the league in terms of individual talent, and if you were to give someone like Bielsa or Bilic that Fulham squad, you'd feel like they completely run away with the league. Under Parker so far this season, there have been a few sort of tactical decisions made which just confuse me at times. The way they play football as well, being very possession heavy, I do feel as if has limited them in a couple of their games. I do feel as if there could have been an extra gear to Fulham this season. Danny Cowley's going to come into this in 12th. I think that he's been fairly consistent in his time at Huddersfield so far. When he came in, the dressing room looked quite toxic. Around the club, the atmosphere wasn't good, and it looked like they were destined to head for League One. Since he has come in, that doesn't look like it will be the case anymore. They are still in that relegation fight, but I think with the additions that they went on to make in January and the spirit they now have around the club, Cowley has a lot to add to that team. In 11th, we're going to have Steve Cooper, his first real crack at the Championship, and there was a lot of uncertainty around Swansea this season after the departure of Graham Potter as well. They lost quite a few big players, you know, the departure of Daniel James and Ollie McBurney. They started out the season absolutely fantastically and looked like they may be a top 2 contender. Since then, they had fallen off a little bit, and there have been a few frustrating performances dotted throughout the season, especially with their lack of goals at times. But overall, with them being in the playoff hunt, I think they are managing expectations, and come the end of the season have every chance of finishing in there. In at 10th, we are then going to have Lee Johnson. Now, come the end of the season, this list could be flipped around a little bit. You know, should Bristol City go on to finish in the top 6, I'd probably have Johnson a little bit higher than this, but judging by Lee Johnson and some of the other managers that are about to follow, Bristol City have spent a lot of money over the past few transfer windows, and you think that that should be taken into consideration. Obviously, with the more money you spend, the more expectations tend to rise. Bristol City have had a lot of opportunities to break into the top 6 lately, but have failed to take them, and they have been quite inconsistent, similar to a lot of other sides around the top 6 this season. On the whole, given the position they're in, it's been a steady season for Bristol City, and with them being in the top 6 chase, you can't really hold that against Johnson. In at 9th, we are then going to have Mark Warburton, and there was an argument to be made that Warburton could be pushed even higher up onto this list, really. Given the job that Warburton had to do at QPR this season, I think he's done absolutely fantastically. You know, Warburton was given the task of completely rebuilding this QPR side with absolutely nothing to spend at all. You know, over the summer they were relying on free transfers and loans coming in. In January they lost their top scorer in Naki Wells, but that hasn't affected them this season. They've actually had a real upturn in form since Wells' departure. And also as well, the football they're playing is absolutely brilliant to watch. Obviously there is the whole, you know, defensive side of the game where I think that Warburton could definitely improve, but other than that, I think you got to respect him for the job he's done there. Up in 8th, we are then going to have Michael O'Neill. Now, he has completely transformed Stoke this season. Since his arrival, Stoke are sat 9th in the form table, and given the job that he walked into at Stoke, that has to be respected. I mean, they were by far the most toxic club in the Championship in terms of the things going on the pitch. The football they were playing was awful. They couldn't stop conceding goals, but since O'Neill's arrival, he's just put an absolute rocket up everyone's backside. Given the fact that, you know, none of the previous like 3 managers seem to crack the code at Stoke, O'Neill seems to be the first one to do that, and that deserves a lot of plaudits. In 7th, we were going to have Blackburn manager Tony Mowbray. I think he's doing an excellent job there this season. Earlier on this season, when Blackburn were struggling in the lower half of the table, I did question, has Mowbray taken this Blackburn side as far as they possibly can go? But since sort of late November, they had a real turn up in form, and they're now only 3 points away from the playoffs. Taking into consideration as well some of the key players who they've had out missing for the season, you know, Bradley Dack for as long as he's been out for, Holtby as well, a couple of others dotted in there. A lot of other clubs will crumble in those situations, but Blackburn have seemingly taken that in their stride. But we then get into the top 6 managers so far this season, and coming in 6th place, it is going to be Preston North End's Alex Neil, for a lot of similar reasons why I had Tony Mowbray so high in this list as well. If you look at the money spent by Preston over the last, say, 4 transfer windows compared to everyone else in that top 6 who are competing with, you know, the likes of Leeds, West Brom, Fulham, Brentford, Forest and Bristol City, Preston have spent an absolute pittance compared to them, and we're competing with them all. That's been through smart recruitment and Alex Neil being able to build up these players over the past few seasons. It's been gradual improvements year upon year. You know, who knows what he'd be capable of had he had all the funds in the world. You know, I mean, we saw it in Norwich, he got them promoted. In 5th, we are going to have Thomas Frank, and fair play for Brentford for sticking with Thomas Frank. You know, it was a bit of a sticky start to the season for Brentford when things just weren't quite coming off for them. They lost Neil Maupay in the summer as well. We all thought that would be a massive blow for them. They didn't actually go ahead and really sign a recognised striker over the summer as well. They trusted Ollie Watkins in that role, and he's gone on to thrive in that position, you know. Brentford only won 3 of their first 11 matches, but since then have gone on an absolute roll and now look certain to finish in the top 6 really. With some of the football they play, they've got a fantastic chance of being promoted come the end of the season. I mean, there's no doubt about it. They are one of the most entertaining sides to watch. They can be an absolute joke at times with the way they can rip into teams going forward. In at 4th, we are then going to have Gary Rowlett. Now, you know when a manager and a club just sort of mesh well together, I feel like Rowlett and Millwall are exactly that. The situation he took over Millwall from, they were 17th in the league, and then since his arrival in the form table, Millwall are 6th in the Championship. That in itself, I think, is an absolutely fantastic achievement. They're well within with a shout of finishing in the top 6 come the end of the season, and once again, similar to Preston and Blackburn, on the budget Millwall are on compared to everyone else around them. Gary Rowlett deserves a lot of respect for this season for what he's done at Millwall. He's completely turned their fortunes around. Coming in 3rd position, we are then going to have Sabri Lamouchi. Now, a lot of managers have been going in and out of Nottingham Forest over the last few years. It's been like a revolving door. No one has quite been able to crack the code up until now. Sabri Lamouchi has got things right. There have been those inconsistent results now and again that have cropped up at the City Ground, and that has been what's been holding them back from going for the top 2 this season. But given the fact that they're in the playoffs, after the way that last season had finished under Martin O'Neill, Lamouchi deserves a lot of respect for this season with what he's done at Forest. And then we get into the top 2. I think these two are quite obviously pit themselves really, but which order you place them? I think the only fair way to do it would be probably to go off the league table standings, so this one could change come the end of the season. So coming in 2nd place, we are going to have Slaven Bilic. I mean, what a job he's done at West Brom this season. Last season, there was, you know, quite a bit of criticism at the time when they made the decision to get rid of Darren Moore, you know, given the situation that they were in. People thought that that was a mistake, but given how this season's gone for West Brom when they did bring in that experienced manager, I mean, he's absolutely taken the league by storm. He had to rebuild their squad over the summer as well with the players he had departing. You know, Jay Rodriguez and Dwight Gale, that was pretty much all their goals from last season gone. And I actually think they spent their money really efficiently throughout the transfer window. Bilic has a 50.2% win ratio at West Brom, which is absolutely fantastic. They're in the top 2. I don't think that he could have done much more. It's been a brilliant season. Which does mean coming in 1st position, we are going to have Marcelo Bielsa. Now, the only thing that separates Bielsa from Bilic, in my view, is where they took over their respective clubs when they first came in through the door. Bielsa took over of a Leeds side who had just finished 13th in the Championship. They were nowhere near pushing for promotion. And the way he's been able to coach these players over the last few years to really elevate their level and the system has been absolutely fantastic. Like, there's no doubt he is one of the most elite coaches in Europe. And of course, Bielsa has been aided with some of the signings that he has been able to make since he has been there. But you can't deny the level of the people that were already at Leeds that Bielsa's been able to coach up and improve is absolutely staggering. And taking everything into consideration, pound for pound, I don't think you can look past Bielsa for this one. So guys, there you do have it. There are all my rankings from managers worst to best. So do you agree with my selections? Let me know in the comments down below. But apart from that will now wrap it up for today's video, guys. So if you did enjoy, make sure to leave a like. It is always massively appreciated. Make sure you do stick around for some regular Championship content. But apart from that, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.